She was just a surrogate, paid to walk away. But when the child said, "Mama," the billionaire realized his secret was never safe. The contract was airtight. No contact, no identity exchange, no visitation rights. Just one perfect, healthy child born of the latest fertility technology, carried by a woman paid to disappear. And Juliet Hale was fine with that. Or at least she pretended to be. Because in the cold, windowless office where she signed away all claims to the child growing inside her, she had one condition of her own: never, ever tell the baby she existed. She couldn't handle knowing a child she brought into the world would grow up calling someone else mother. She was 26, quiet, unremarkable, a part-time librarian with a failed art degree, a mountain of medical debt, and custody of a teenage sister whose heart was failing fast. She needed the money. Her soul? That wasn't in the contract. The man on the other side of the deal was never introduced. But she knew who he was. Kellen Rourke, tech mogul, net worth $42 billion. A ghost in Silicon Valley. Rumors swirled. About the fiancé who died in a plane crash. About the obsession with legacy. About the fortress he called home that no child had ever entered. Until now, the embryo had been genetically his. The deal had been sealed. And when the due date came, Juliet followed the rules. Checked in under a false name. Gave birth in a locked private wing. And left before the baby even opened his eyes. No skin to skin. No name. No Bouvier. But something broke in her that day. And 3 years later, it came back to haunt her. It happened in a place she never should have been. She wasn't stalking, not exactly. It was supposed to be a quick delivery, her freelance side gig, dropping off rare books to high-end collectors. She didn't even realize where she was until the gate buzzed open and she saw it. Rourke Estate. She nearly backed out, nearly turned around, but she needed the money. The package was already in the back seat. The house was massive, glass and steel and silence. The door opened before she knocked. A butler. Cold. Efficient. "You're early. Come in." She stepped inside, heart pounding, throat dry. And then, she heard it. Tiny footsteps. A child's giggle. And before she could react, a little boy ran around the corner and barreled straight in her legs. He froze. Blinked up at her. Big eyes. Blue. Her breath caught. And then, in the smallest, softest voice, the child whispered, "Mama." From the hallway, a shadow moved. Sharp. Cold. Kellen Rourke stepped into view. And for the first time in his life, the king of code, who built empires with logic and annihilated competitors with silence, completely froze. Because the child had never said that word before. Not once. Not to his nannies. Not to therapists. Not even in his sleep. He had never known his mother. Never seen her. Until now. And now, the child had spoken. And the woman standing in his foyer, pale, shaking, eyes wide, was exactly the one he'd spent 3 years paying to forget. But she had come back. Or maybe she had never truly left. Juliet hadn't meant to move. Her legs simply obeyed the scream inside her to run. But before she could take a step back, the boy, her boy, reached up and grabbed her hand. Small fingers. Warm. Real. Like he knew her. Juliet dropped to her knees, heart fracturing at the look in his eyes. There was no mistaking it now. His features were his father's, the fine jawline, the stubborn mouth. But those eyes, impossibly wide and blue-tinged with violet, were her own, down to the subtle flecks near the iris. Her throat closed. "Sweetheart," she whispered, voice breaking, I'm not." "Mama," he said again, more confident this time. Behind them, silence sharpened like glass. Kellen stood still. Not a single muscle moved, but his eyes, icy, analytical, always 10 steps ahead, were locked on her hand and the boy's. He saw it, the resemblance, the bond, the crack in his perfect, sterile world. Juliet stood, gently prying her hand from the boy's. "I think there's been a mistake. You were never supposed to see him," Kellen said. The words landed like gunshots. Juliet turned toward him, her chest rising and falling with the rhythm of a heart breaking all over again. He hadn't changed much. Still impossibly composed. Still impossibly beautiful in that cold, untouchable way. Except now, there were faint lines at the corners of his mouth, stress lines, and something hollow behind the confidence. "You're right," she said softly. "I wasn't supposed to see him. I didn't even know where this house was. I had a delivery, books. Your staff ordered them under a collector alias." His jaw flexed. A war zone flickered behind his expression. "And you expect me to believe this is a coincidence? I don't care what you believe." Her voice steadied. "I'm leaving." But the child, his name still unknown to her, grabbed her again. "Don't go," he said, his voice trembling. "Please don't go." It was that moment, that voice, that buckled something inside Kellen. He stepped forward, slowly, like a man approaching a minefield. "His name is Aiden," he said. "He hasn't spoken in 2 years. Not a single word. Until now." Juliet's lips parted, but no sound came. 2 years. Silence. And then Mama. Something cold and electric spiraled through her spine. "You didn't tell me," she whispered, voice shaking. "You didn't tell me he wasn't okay. You signed the contract," he snapped, but there was no real bite in his voice, only the echo of fear. "You walked away. That's what you wanted." "No," she said. "It's what you paid for." The boy, Aiden, looked between them, his face crumpling as the air thickened with pain and truth and things he didn't yet understand. "I need to go," Juliet said, backing toward the door. "I shouldn't have come." But before she could reach it, a soft, choked sob stopped her cold. She turned. Aiden had fallen to the floor, arms wrapped around his knees, the same way he had when she walked out of the hospital delivery, sweet 3 years ago, when the nurse said, "Don't worry, you won't see him. You'll never hear him cry." Except now he was crying, and this time, she was here to hear it. She dropped beside him, arms instinctively wrapping around his tiny frame. He buried his face in her neck, and something ancient and maternal and undeniable surged in her chest. "I can't," she gasped, tears blurring her vision. "I can't leave him like this." Behind her, Kellen's voice was quiet, almost unreadable. "Then don't." She looked up. He wasn't glaring anymore, wasn't posturing. He looked lost. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he said, more to himself than her. "He wasn't supposed to need you." Juliet stood, still cradling the child. "Then maybe you were wrong." She should have walked out, should have handed him the child and slammed the door behind her. But her arms refused. Her heart refused. And when Aiden whispered, "Can you stay?" against her neck, everything she had built to protect herself shattered. Kellen spoke again. Just one word this time. "Stay." But the way he said it, raw like it hurt to admit, made her freeze. Because the man who never asked for help was asking now. Juliet didn't say yes. Not out loud. But she didn't leave. And that was all the answer Kellen needed. Aiden had fallen asleep within minutes, curled against her like he had never known another version of comfort. His small hand clung to the collar of her shirt like it was the only anchor left in a world that never made sense to him. Kellen had watched in silence from the opposite end of the room. Watched like a man seeing something forbidden, something that hurt to witness and hurt even more to want. His speech delay, Juliet said finally, stroking Aiden's soft curls. "When did it start?" 18 months, Kellen replied. Doctors blamed trauma. Said some children regress after early speech. Others go quiet entirely. They gave a name. Selective mutism. She turned her eyes on him, sharp and unflinching. But what caused the trauma? Kellen didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, he walked toward the fireplace, lit only by dim embers now, and rested a hand against the mantel like it was the only thing holding him upright. "You left the hospital that night," he said, voice low. "Just like the contract said. I didn't see him until the next morning. I brought him home alone. No mother. No family. No warmth." Juliet swallowed. "You didn't hire anyone? Not even a nanny?" He laughed, bitter and brittle. "I hired 3. Fired 2 within a month. The 3rd stayed, until she called me a machine and walked out." She didn't know what shocked her more, that he admitted it, or that he sounded ashamed. "Why?" she asked. He didn't turn around. "Because I was afraid if someone else raised him, I'd lose him before I ever knew him." That silenced her. And in that silence, something inside her shifted. This wasn't the monster the tabloids painted. This wasn't the heartless CEO who outsourced parenthood with zero emotion. This was a man who had built a fortress not just around his estate, but around his soul. And now it was cracking. He finally looked at her. He didn't speak, he said. Not once. For 2 years. Until today. Juliet stood slowly, lifting the sleeping child with her. He remembered me. He shouldn't have. You were never in the room. You never held him. Maybe some bonds don't care about logic, she whispered. Kellen's eyes searched hers. For understanding. For blame. For absolution he couldn't name. Then, almost cautiously, he stepped forward. Come with me, he said. She hesitated. Where? He looked away. There's a room. She followed. Through marble hallways and past cold steel doors, he led her to the West Wing. A place she suspected few had ever seen. The door at the end of the hall was different, softer, painted sky blue. A child's drawing taped to the outside. A stick figure. 3 of them. A tall man, a small boy, and a woman with yellow hair and big blue eyes. Juliet's hand flew to her mouth. Kellen opened the door. It was a nursery, but not the cold, minimalist kind she expected. No, this was something else entirely. A museum of hope. Half-finished projects littered the floor. Wooden toys. Blocks. Books about feelings and family and dinosaurs. But it was the wall that stole her breath. Dozens of drawings. All the same 3 figures. The boy in the middle. The tall man. The smiling woman. In every one, she was there. She stepped toward them, her vision blurring. You didn't know he was drawing me? She whispered. Kellen's voice was hollow. I thought it was an imaginary friend. A version of what he wished he had. Tears fell freely now, silent and devastating. He did have it, she choked out. He had me, even if it was only for 9 months. I spoke to him every night. I sang to him. I told him who I was. I told him. Kellen stepped closer. What? That I loved him, she whispered. Even if I never saw him again. His breath caught. The boy had remembered. Not with memory, but with soul. That's when Kellen did something she never expected. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded letter. He handed it to her. This came 2 weeks ago, from the lab that managed the IVF. She unfolded it with shaking fingers. Subject, critical disclosure update, embryo 4B. As her eyes scanned the lines, the room spun. Genetic misclassification. Non-anonymized maternal profile. Full biological match with Juliet Hale. Her knees buckled. I thought it was your embryo, she gasped. Kellen nodded, face pale. So did I. But you said the embryo was donated, he finished. From a private program. I didn't want my DNA involved. Too many risks. Too much press. She staggered back. You didn't use your own embryo, she whispered. No, and I wasn't just the surrogate. Kellen's voice was quiet now. No, Juliet, you're not the surrogate. You're his mother. Juliet didn't speak. She couldn't. The room felt too small. The walls, covered in crayon hopes and paper dreams, pressed in around her, suffocating. Aiden stirred in her arms, sensing the storm before she could even name it. His little hand clutched her blouse, seeking calm. Seeking her. She held him tighter. Mother. She wasn't just the woman who carried him. She wasn't just a vessel paid to vanish. She was his mother, in blood, in spirit, and now, in truth. I signed a contract, she finally said, her voice ragged. A contract that said I had no rights. That I was just a carrier. An incubator. Kellen nodded once. So did I. She snapped her eyes up to him, fury rising. You're saying we were both lied to? No, he said. I'm saying the contract was a lie to begin with. He walked across the nursery to a locked drawer built into the window seat. He opened it with a biometric scan, of course, and retrieved a thick file. He handed it to her without a word. She opened it. Project Hale. Her breath hitched. Dozens of pages. Legal documents. Fertility records. Test logs. Logs of her. A copy of her college medical release forms. Her blood donation registry. Even an outdated genetic profile from a hospital she barely remembered visiting in her sophomore year. You built a child using my DNA without telling me, she whispered, stunned. You bought my biology? Kellen looked sick. No, I swear to you, I didn't know until 2 weeks ago. My team sourced from an elite pool of donors. Anonymous. Screened. But someone in the system sold private data. Her head swam. She wasn't chosen. She was taken, and you still implanted it in me. Her voice cracked like glass. You implanted a child that was already mine without ever telling me. Kellen didn't blink. Because I didn't know, Juliet. Not then. If I had, I never would have let you go. The words hit harder than they should have. She didn't know if it was the truth or just his guilt talking, but it burned either way. She moved toward the crib and laid Aiden down gently. He stirred, murmured her name, Mama, then settled back into sleep. The sound stabbed through her chest like a blade. She turned to face the billionaire who had ruined everything. You build a life out of silence, she said. Silence in your house. Silence in his world. Silence in the truth. I didn't know how to be a father, he admitted, voice raw. But I tried. I've tried. Every day, I have files of his speech therapy. A custom curriculum. A team of neurodevelopmental specialists on call. But none of them could do what one word from me did, she said quietly. One word. Mama. That was the key. Not therapy. Not money. Me. He didn't deny it. I need to go, she said, moving to the door. He stepped in front of her. What are you going to do? He asked. She froze. Her hand clenched the doorknob. I don't know. You could sue. Yes. You could go to the press. Yes. You could take him. She looked him in the eye. Could I? He swallowed. No, you couldn't. That stopped her. Why not? Because of Section 9. Clause 14. He turned and pulled another file from the drawer. This one was thinner. A single page inside. She recognized it instantly. Her own signature. Her own handwriting. Her breath caught. It was an old clause. One she hadn't noticed. One buried in legal jargon and medical paperwork, and fine print printed in 8-point font. Should the child prove to be a full biological offspring of the surrogate mother, all prior terms will be subject to legal renegotiation. In such event, the named mother will retain. She trailed off. 50% custody, Kellen finished for her. It's yours if you want it. Juliet stepped back. He wasn't lying, but he wasn't offering it freely either. You waited, she said. You knew this. For 2 weeks. And you waited to tell me. I needed to see something first, he replied. What? If you felt it. The bond. The connection. If you could still be his mother. And if I couldn't, she whispered, I'd have let you walk. She shook her head. You're lying. He stepped closer. No, Juliet. For once I'm not. Because if I can't give him a mother who wants to stay, then I'd rather give him the memory of the one who never meant to leave. The room went still. All that remained was the faint sound of Aiden breathing in the crib. And the silence, the weight of everything they'd both done wrong. She should have screamed, should have torn the paper and walked out forever. But all she said was, tomorrow, 10 a.m., my lawyer will call yours. She opened the door, then paused. I don't trust you, she said without turning around. But I trust what he felt when he saw me. Kellen nodded, barely breathing. And if you ever try to take him from me again, his voice was hoarse. You'll destroy me. She looked over her shoulder. No, she said. I'll replace you. And then she was gone. But she didn't go far. Juliet stood in the courthouse elevator. Her reflection fractured across the steel walls like a woman split between two lives. The childless woman she was supposed to be, quiet, obedient, forgotten, and the mother she had become. She clutched the folder tighter, full of letters, witness statements, even a pediatric psychologist's report from a hastily arranged emergency consult the night before. It wasn't just emotional anymore. This was war. And in court, war demanded evidence. When the elevator opened, she stepped into a world built for power. Polished marble floors, wood-paneled courtrooms, and men in $1,000 suits who only knew how to win. Across the room, Kellen sat flanked by 2 lawyers, one corporate, one family law. Of course, always prepared, always covered, but his eyes found her instantly. And for a moment, everything else faded. She hated that. The bailiff called their names. Judge Eliza Camden, a no-nonsense woman known for ripping apart Fortune 500 CEOs with equal precision and disdain, peered at them over thin gold reading glasses. I was expecting a custody negotiation, she said flatly, scanning the file. Not a corporate class action scandal tangled with reproductive ethics and 6 counts of data privacy violation. Juliet's lawyer cleared her throat. Your Honor, my client is requesting immediate shared legal custody based on Section 9, Clause 14 of the original contract, now enforceable by the verified maternal genetic link. And you, Mr. Rourke? The judge asked, eyes narrowing. Kellen rose. No notes. No papers. Just his voice. I agree to the clause. A hush fell. Even Juliet's lawyer turned. You're not contesting? Kellen shook his head once. No. The judge arched a brow. You understand the implications? Once granted, Ms. Hale would gain legal access to all decisions regarding the child. Education, medical care, living arrangements, even surname changes. Understand, Kellen said quietly. And I accept it. Juliet's heart pounded. This was the man who had hidden behind walls of silence, who had paid her to disappear, who once thought emotions were liabilities, and now he was surrendering control. But why? The judge tapped her pen against the desk. Well then, effective immediately, legal co-custody is granted. Further arrangements, residency, scheduling, schooling, will be negotiated in chambers this week. She looked at both of them. I strongly advise you two to learn how to coexist, or the only person who'll suffer is that little boy. Juliet nodded stiffly. Kellen only murmured, Yes, Your Honor. The gavel came down. Custody was official, but closure was still galaxies away. They didn't speak again until they stepped into the parking garage. The silence between them was sharp, intimate, like the moment before a storm breaks open. I wanted to stay with me this week, she said. Kellen nodded. Agreed. And I want to enroll him in a speech center near my apartment. It's across the street. He'll feel safe. Send me the details. She turned to leave, but paused. You didn't have to give in, she said slowly. You could have fought. I was ready to, he admitted, until I watched him sleep last night. She glanced back. I sat outside his door, Kellen continued. For hours. He kept whispering your name, over and over. Not crying, not scared, just whispering. Juliet felt something in her chest break. I thought he wouldn't notice when I took you away, Kellen said. Turns out, I was the only one who didn't. He looked wrecked in a way she had never seen before. Not the kind of broken you get from losing a deal, but the kind that comes from realizing you were the villain in someone else's story, and that your own child had felt it. She didn't comfort him. She couldn't. Not yet. So instead she simply said, I'll pick him up Friday, and walked away. That night, Juliet brought Aiden home. Not to a mansion, not to marble floors or touch-screen elevators, but to a small 2-bedroom walk-up with creaky stairs, warm light, and shelves stuffed with dog-eared books. He clung to her like a second skin, ate his dinner without a word, sat in her lap during a bedtime story with wide, wondering eyes. And when she tucked him in, he looked up at her, uncertain, shy, and whispered, Will you still be here when I wake up? She smiled through the tears she wouldn't let fall. Yes, baby, she said. Every morning now. He reached up, touched her face, then whispered, Promise? She kissed his forehead. Always. And for the first time in 3 years, Juliet Hale closed her eyes and slept with a full heart. It started with a knock. Juliet was just finishing her second cup of coffee. Aiden still asleep in his room, the apartment silent except for the faint hum of a radiator. She wasn't expecting anyone, not a delivery, not a visitor, and certainly not him. So when she opened the door and saw Kellen Rourke standing there, jaw tight, coat damp from the cold, a manila envelope clutched in one hand, her heart dropped. Aiden was upstairs, safe, asleep, but instinct didn't wait for facts. Her spine snapped straight. A chill coursed through her. What's wrong? She asked, voice already sharpened with panic. Will everything be okay with him? Kellen didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked upward, toward the hallway, toward Aiden's room. Then he looked back at her, something hollow in his gaze. No, he said quietly, holding up the envelope. Not if you don't see this. She didn't move, just stared at the file like it was poison. What is it? She asked finally. Kellen's jaw worked. The truth. She stepped aside, against her better judgment. He didn't sit. He never did. He always stood like a man one breath from flight or fight. Juliet took the file, slid a nail beneath the flap, pulled out the papers inside. A photograph slipped out first, old, scanned, printed in black and white. It was a lab report. The header bore a corporate logo she didn't recognize. Genetrac's Initiative, private file, unauthorized access prohibited. Juliet's eyes narrowed. What is this? Kellen exhaled. 3 years ago, I was approached by a woman named Dr. Lillian Morse. She ran a startup claiming to have unlocked a new branch of predictive genome therapy. Said she could match personality traits between parents and potential offspring. Design her children. Juliet spat. That's what you wanted? No, he snapped. That's what I thought I didn't want. But she said they weren't designing. They were recovering. Juliet's blood ran cold. Recovering what? Kellen's voice dropped. People. Lost people. Her hand tightened around the file. I gave her one thing, he said, his eyes never leaving hers. Just one. She flipped to the next page. A DNA strand. A comparison chart. 2 names highlighted. Kellen Rourke. Amelia Rourke, deceased, age 5. Juliet froze. What is this? Kellen looked down. His voice cracked. My sister, he said. She died when I was 15. Leukemia. There wasn't even time for a trial. I watched her fade out in a matter of months. Juliet's throat dried. She was smart, he whispered. Curious. She wanted to be an astronaut. She made me promise, at her funeral, that if I ever became powerful enough, I'd build something better. A world where no kid died alone. Juliet stared down at the chart again. But that doesn't explain why my son's name is in this file. Kellen met her gaze. Because the woman who sold me the embryo lied. She didn't use your profile out of coincidence. She matched it. To what? To my sister. Juliet's entire body went still. Kellen took a step closer, guilt written across every line of his face. She built him to be the statistical echo of her. A theoretical match. Not a clone, but as close as science could dare. She said the embryo would give us a child with the same cognitive wiring, the same learning patterns, the same soul. Juliet backed away. You let them turn our child into a memorial project. I didn't know, he shouted. I didn't know, Juliet. Not until last week. The lab folded. A whistleblower sent me the files. I was going to burn them. Her voice was ice. But you didn't. He stepped forward. Because I thought you deserved to know that he's not just ours. He was built to be someone else too. Juliet trembled. Not with fear. With rage. You took my body. You took my child. And now you're telling me he was engineered to replace your dead sister? I never wanted that, Kellen whispered. I just wanted a family. Something that couldn't be destroyed by grief. But you built him out of grief, she snapped. And now he's here. Real. Laughing. Living. And all you see is a ghost you couldn't save. Kellen didn't respond. He didn't need to. She saw it in his face. The truth. He had loved the idea of saving something. Of proving the universe wrong. And in doing so, he had rewritten the very soul of their child. Juliet stepped to the door and opened it. Get out. Juliet. Now. He hesitated, then nodded once, and walked away. She didn't cry. Not yet. She couldn't, because upstairs, Aiden stirred, called her name, Mama. And she wiped her eyes, straightened her spine, walked up the stairs to face the only thing that mattered. Not DNA, not contracts, not billionaires, just a boy, her boy, who was never a ghost, who was never a project, who was only, and finally, hers. The news broke on a Thursday. Juliet was brushing Aiden's hair by the window, his tiny feet swinging beneath the chair. Mornings were their favorite now. Quiet, predictable, just the two of them, catching up on 3 years of everything they'd missed. She was humming softly, running the brush gently over his fine, sleep-tousled hair when her phone buzzed against the counter. She almost ignored it. These rituals were sacred now, but the caller ID made her freeze. Lena Blackwell, senior editor, The Herald. She hadn't spoken to Lena since college. They'd taken a single journalism class together, back when Juliet thought writing would save the world. Now Lena was calling her at 8:17 a.m. on a quiet morning. She picked up. Jules, Lena said breathlessly. Tell me you're not involved. Juliet's stomach twisted. Involved in what? You haven't seen it yet? Lena asked. They published the leak. What leak? Genetrax, the artificial embryo program. The one used to construct legacy children through unauthorized DNA recovery. There's a name in the report, Juliet. Her pulse crashed against her ribs. Who's? A pause. Then, softly, Kellen Rourke. Juliet sat down hard on the couch. The room spun. Aiden looked up at her with wide eyes, his tiny brush still in hand. What's wrong, Mama? She forced a smile. Nothing, baby. Keep brushing, just like I showed you. She ended the call and pulled up the article. The child code scandal. Billionaire Kellen Rourke implicated in designer genome controversy. Right there on the first page, his name, his company, a blurry image of the Genetrax file, her genetic profile in the corner. Not labeled, but she knew it, and anyone who knew her could figure it out fast. She called him, straight to voicemail. The second time, it rang once before cutting off. He wasn't answering. Juliet walked back into the room, where Aiden sat patiently on the floor, still humming to himself. She dropped to her knees and picked up his slippers, soft gray ones with little stars on the toes. She slipped his feet into them with trembling hands, holding onto the rhythm of routine like it could stop the whole world from breaking apart. Aiden leaned forward and rested his head on her shoulder. She stayed there a moment longer, one hand on his back, the other gripping the floor like it could keep her anchored. Because the past wasn't just coming for Kellen. It was coming for her, too. By noon, paparazzi had parked outside her building. By 3 p.m., someone had found her old university thesis, where she'd written about medical ethics and the slippery slope of gene editing. By sunset, her sister called from the Midwest. Are you okay? Elsie asked. They're showing your face, Jules. Juliet didn't know what she was. She wasn't under arrest. She hadn't done anything illegal. She hadn't signed up for this. But now the world thought she was some complicit player in an underground eugenics experiment. And Aiden, her baby, her innocent child, had become the face of something monstrous. By evening, the doorbell rang. She expected cameras, maybe a lawyer, but it was him, Kellen. No code, no bodyguards, no polished image. Just a man who looked like he hadn't slept in days. She opened the door, and before she could speak, Aiden's voice echoed down the hall. Mama? Who is it? He came running from the living room, the soft pat of his slippers brushing the wood floor. His star-patterned pajama shirt was tugged half off one shoulder, his hair a mess of sleepy curls. When he saw Kellen, he slowed. His eyes scanned him, curious but not afraid. Then, with the quiet certainty only a child could possess, Aiden gave a soft wave. Oh, dot. The word cracked something deep inside Kellen, not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it was natural, unforced, as if Aiden had always expected this moment to come, as if he still believed in the picture he had drawn, Mom, Dad, and him, together. Kellen couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Juliet knelt and placed a gentle hand on Aiden's shoulder. Hey, sweetheart, she said softly. Can you go play with your cars for a few minutes? Mommy and Daddy need to talk about something really important. Aiden looked between them, his brow furrowed. You'll come back. She nodded. 5 minutes. Promise. He hugged her briefly, then padded back into the living room without another word. Juliet waited until she heard the soft clack of toy wheels on the floor before stepping out into the hallway, letting the door fall, closed behind her. And then, her voice turned ice. You promised me there were no records, she hissed. That Genetrax folded, that it was over. I didn't leak it, but you knew it existed. You knew this could happen. You knew my DNA was on file. I was going to tell the board next week, he said. Shut everything down. Preempt the fallout. But someone beat me to it. Juliet's jaw clenched. Why now? I don't know. He did. She could see it in his eyes. Tell me, she demanded. Who leaked it? He hesitated, then said, Zara. Juliet blinked. Your sister? She found the file. She knew about Amelia. She didn't agree with what I did. She thought I had created Aiden out of grief. Because you did, Juliet snapped. You made a child to rewrite your trauma. And now he's going to grow up as a headline. Kellen leaned against the wall, hands shaking. I'm shutting everything down, he said. The board, the labs, every partner that ever touched Genitrax. And what about us? She asked quietly. Me and Aiden? What happens when his teacher Googles his name? When some angry blog calls him a Frankenstein? I'll handle it. You won't, she said. Because you can't. He looked at her then, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes she hadn't before. Not guilt, not sorrow, fear. I'm going to disappear, he said. What? I've already resigned from my companies. I transfer my shares to a trust. I booked a flight for midnight. Juliet stared at him, stunned. You're running? I'm protecting him, Kellen said. As long as I'm in the spotlight, he is. The world thinks he's a product, a symbol. If I vanish, the story loses oxygen. And what do you expect me to do? She whispered. Be his mother, he said. The one thing I was never good enough to be. Juliet looked at him, really looked. This wasn't an escape. It was a penance. I never wanted this, she said. Not the scandal, not the science, not the power games. I just want a child they said I couldn't have. He nodded. And you got him, Kellen said. Better than I ever did. Silence fell between them. Then Kellen stepped back toward the stairs. I left a file on your kitchen counter. It has everything, assets, protection clauses, a full custody transfer. Juliet blinked. You're giving him up? I'm giving him back, Kellen said. She didn't stop him, didn't call his name, because for once, Kellen wasn't vanishing into his empire or hiding behind lawyers. He was walking away, not from a scandal, but from control, from ego, and maybe, just maybe, towards something like redemption. That night, Aiden asked to sleep at her bed. Juliet didn't hesitate. He curled up beside her, tucked under the blanket with his favorite stuffed bear, the soft pat of his starry slippers barely making a sound as he climbed in. He pressed his little face against her shoulder, quiet, thoughtful. Did I do something bad? He whispered. Juliet blinked hard, her throat closing up. No, sweetheart, she said gently. You didn't do anything wrong. He was quiet for a long time. Then, barely audible, he asked, Mama, do you think Daddy's gonna come back someday? She inhaled sharply, turned her face slightly so he wouldn't see her eyes filling. I don't know, she whispered. But maybe when he's ready. Do you think he misses us? She swallowed. I think he misses you. That answer wasn't enough. Aiden shifted in the dark, his voice small, a little shakier this time. Do you miss him too? Juliet closed her eyes. A tear slipped sideways onto the pillow. She reached for his hand. Yes, baby. I miss him. Then why did he go? Her heart broke. Clean, quiet, irrevocable. She didn't have an answer she could speak without shattering. So she pulled him close and whispered only. It wasn't your fault. None of this was. He didn't speak again. She held him until he fell asleep. And in that silence, with the weight of his tiny hand resting against her heart, she made a decision. She would speak, not to clear her name, not to defend Kellen, but because her son deserved a world that didn't define him by code or scandal or synthetic labels. He was real. He was hers. And no one, no board, no camera, no courtroom was going to take that from her. The next night, Juliet walked into the Worldview studio with her son, Aiden, the boy whose existence was debated across headlines and screens. The boy the world tried to label before they even listened to him. She held his hand gently as they entered through the side entrance. Waiting for them was Lena Blackwell, the same Lena who once called her out of the blue, warning her the story had broken. Thank you for coming, Juliet said softly. Lena nodded, eyes flicking to Aiden. He looks good. He's better when he's near me, Juliet said, then knelt beside her son. Sweetheart, I need you to stay here with Aunt Lena for a little while, okay? Just a few minutes. There are going to be a lot of lights and loud voices, and I don't want anyone to make you feel bad, okay? If they say things that sound mean or confusing, just remember, you're safe. You're mine. Aiden nodded, a little uncertain, but trusting. You'll come back. 5 minutes, she promised. And then we'll go home. The cameras rolled. The studio lights warmed. The host adjusted her notes. Juliet stepped into frame. Alone, but not afraid. The host began. Juliet Tejade, the woman at the center of the Genitrax controversy. You've been called the surrogate, the ghost mother, the woman who disappeared. What do you say to that? Juliet didn't blink. She looked into the camera. I say the world forgot to ask the only person who mattered. She held up one of Aiden's drawings. A stick figure of a tall man. A small boy. A yellow-haired woman with blue eyes. He dreams of family. Not technology. Not controversy. Just love. The host leaned in. Did you know what you were part of? Juliet answered without hesitation. No, I didn't know what they took from me, but I know what I fought to get back. The host opened her mouth for another question, and then chaos broke. A commotion off-screen. Raised voices. A security guard shouting, "Sir, you can't go in there." And then, Kellen Rourke burst into the studio. Hair disheveled. No PR team. No power suit. Just a man who looked like he hadn't slept. Who had finally stopped hiding. Juliet turned as he entered the shot, breath frozen in her throat. The host stood in shock. "This is Mr. Rourke. This is unauthorized." "I know," he said, stepping forward, "but I need to speak." Juliet stared at him, unsure if she should run or reach for him. The cameras didn't cut. Kellen turned to face the world. "My name is Kellen Rourke. I created the system. I signed the contracts. I built the silence." His voice cracked. His shoulders shook. "And I took everything away from the one person who never asked for anything." He looked at Juliet. She didn't vanish. "I erased her because I was afraid of what it would mean if I let myself feel." He looked back at the camera. "But I do feel. I feel every second I missed with my son. Every time he said, 'Mama,' and I wasn't enough. Every drawing where he hoped we'd be together. And then, a soft sound. 'Daddy,' from backstage. A small voice. The cameras panned, just as Aiden ran onto the set. Past Lena, past the chaos. His little shoes tapping against the stage floor. 'Daddy!' He threw his arms around Kellen's leg, clinging hard. Then turned, reached for Juliet, and whispered through a smile. 'Let's go home. I want to go home. You and me.' Juliet dropped to her knees. Kellen followed, and for a moment, just one quiet, sacred moment, the three of them held each other. The host was silent. The crew stopped breathing, and somewhere across 1,000 living rooms, the country exhaled. Because no matter what the headlines said, this child didn't want a verdict. He just wanted mommy, daddy, and peace. The host cleared her throat. I think that's where we leave it." The screen faded to black. The mics were cut, and the three of them were quietly ushered out the back door. No cameras, no flashbulbs. Just a boy between his parents, and the feeling of going home, together. The days after the studio broadcast were a blur of headlines, camera flashes, and public whiplash. For a while, the world didn't know what to do with Kellen Rourke. Yes, he had told the truth. Yes, he had confessed. Live, raw, unscripted. But the science? The contracts? The buried files? It was still a storm. He was pulled into hearings. Ethics panels. Civil courtrooms with cold ceilings and colder questions. But no criminal charges stuck. Why? Because the lab had collapsed. The records were fragmented. And the one person who could have buried him, Juliet, chose peace over punishment. The world didn't forget what happened, but stopped screaming. And slowly, it went quiet. They moved shortly after, not far from the city, but far enough that the headlines felt like they belonged to someone else. The house was small, a crooked mailbox, a garden out back with struggling sunflowers. But it was perfect. Aiden was happy. He was almost 4 now, and the brochures for kindergarten had already arrived. He liked to line them up on the table, photos of playgrounds and story circles, and ask, "Do they let moms and dads come too?" Juliet would always say, "On your first day, we'll both be there, no matter what." After that night at the studio, Kellen stayed for dinner. Lemon pasta, laughter, a little boy refusing to let go of his arm. And Kellen did not refuse him and stayed overnight with them. In the morning, he left for work, still untangling the wreckage of his legacy. But before he left, he knelt beside Aiden, pressed his forehead gently to the boys and whispered, "I'll come back. More and more. You'll see. I promise." And he did. He rented a modest apartment nearby. No marble floors, no staff. Just quiet walls and a drawer full of drawings. He walked his son to the park, read books on early childhood trauma, always asked how Juliet and Aiden were doing, if everything was okay with them every day. Always called Juliet before showing up. Always knocked. He didn't try to reclaim. He rebuilt. And slowly, day by day, morning by morning, he was there together with them. Not because the world left him, but because his son needed him. And that was everything. One Sunday afternoon, Juliet stood on the porch as Aiden played in the yard, chasing bubbles, grass stains blooming on his jeans. Kellen walked up beside her, mug in hand, tired and smiling. "He's getting fast," he said. Juliet nodded. "He's chasing everything he thought he'd never catch." Kellen looked at her and said gently, "So am I." She didn't answer right away, just reached down and laced her fingers with his. Inside the house, a breeze shifted the corner of a crayon drawing on the fridge. The same one Aiden had made long ago. A tall man, a small boy, a yellow-haired woman, all holding hands. That was the story the world never wrote. But it was the one they were living now. Together. Finally.